Well, hello to an amazing Wednesday live stream that I'm very excited to be here with Quincy Larson from FreeCodeCamp. Wow, that is exciting. Thank you so much for joining us, Quincy. I can see everyone is extremely excited to talk to you.
Hey everyone.
Yeah.
Great to see you all. I'm in chat, so I see your kind words. Thank you very much. And I recognize a lot of the people here.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
many people here. Very exciting. So Zenedith wants to let you know that the Seoul, I can never pronounce that city, Seoul SCC Discord is good. Real camaraderie in there. That is what you want when learning to code. Amazing. Oh, Bob Zerol has joined as well.
Right on. Yeah, good to see you, Bob. Seoul has a special place in my heart. I've been there a few times, and it's just an amazing city. And of course, like very vibrant developer community as well. So you all out there in Seoul, keep being awesome.
Yeah. Shreyans is looking forward to this stream, as am I. So we have an array of things to talk about today, based around kind of study tips, learning to code, and all sorts of things like that. I have prepared some questions, but of course, if you have your own questions for Quincy, I would love to ask them. So drop them in the chat. Caffeinated Pixel says, howdy folks, Quincy is like a god. Yeah, totally. So let's get started with some questions, if you're okay with that, Quincy. I would like to start by setting the scene a bit for those who are maybe not familiar with FreeCodeCamp. I doubt there are many, but you never know. Can you tell us a little bit about it and its relationship with Scrimba?
Absolutely. So we have a long history with Scrimba.
Yeah.
I don't know, probably like 4 years, I would say, maybe longer. I'm not sure exactly. Like when I first met with Per and talked with him and hung out with him, like just virtually. We haven't gotten to meet in person, but of course, I'm hoping to meet with him if I make it up to Northern Europe at some point, or if he makes it down to the States to visit. But I just was immediately blown away by the caliber of the engineering behind, the tools that you all have built. And so we very quickly started sending people over to check out Scrimba and create like what I think are incredibly accessible, both for a data perspective and from a like everything is an element. You can interact with everything. It's in my mind kind of the future of how you would do like an interactive lecture. And I do think that the product just continues to evolve. And so it's awesome. We love it. And I use periodically myself. We've taught entire courses using Scrimba as like the playground that we build things in, just because it's so powerful.
Yeah, that is super cool. Can you tell us a bit about the background of FreeCodeCamp itself? How did it get started? And how was it born? Yeah,
so I learned to code the old-fashioned way, going uphill both ways. I'm an old timer, right? So I used like MIT OpenCourseWare textbooks from like the library. I was 31 when I started, 31-ish when I was learning to code, and I just had no idea what I was doing. There were some kind of like lists floating around on the internet of like, oh, you should learn this and then this and then this. And people had like strapped together their own curriculum from different like open textbooks and things like that. So I used all that stuff, and I hung out at the Santa Barbara hackerspace. I was living in Santa Barbara, California. And so it was a very lonely, ambiguous process. I would go to the hackerspace and just sit there and like go through textbooks and solve Project Euler problems using Python. That was like the main way I practiced, was I just tried to solve all the Project Euler problems. Of course, I didn't get even close to doing them all, but it was lonely because I'd be the only person at the hackerspace. Like I had a key to the place, so I'd just go there and sit there among all the dead Roombas, and they had like this like maker. It's like a maker space basically. but primarily people use software instead of hardware, which I think is more fun and dynamic. And there's like robotics club and everything, but like these people were mostly focused with software because software is what you use to build big companies. It's hard to build a hardware company, right? Everybody there wanted to be like a big startup founder and stuff. So I learned how to code just going every weekend. I'd get on a train. I'd go up to like, say I'd go down to San Diego. I'd go over to LA. I'd go up to San Francisco Bay Area, or I'd go to Vegas or someplace. There was always a big hackathon, and I would go and enter it. And every single weekend I would do a hackathon. Like I did like 40 of them in 1 year, I think. That was kind of like the trial by fire that I needed to like build projects over and over, just build projects, ship things, get humiliated by like screwing up the Git history. Like I learned things the hard way, right? And I did eventually get a job after about 7 or 8 months of grinding like this as a software engineer. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, but it was hard as hell. and like, it could be so much easier. So that was what I carried after working for about a year as a software engineer, and then like just doing freelance work and doing everything else. I felt like I need to make it easier for other people to get into the field. Because if some 30-year-old teacher who has no technical background and just has like this determination that they're going to like learn to code can do it, I think there are a lot of other people who could probably do it, but don't have, the luxury of being able to spend the amount of time I have, or need additional support. So that was the genesis of the FreeCodeCamp community in my mind, was like, I'm going to create tools that make it easier for people to learn to code. I created a bunch that nobody cared about. And then eventually one weekend I stood up freecodecamp.org, and I just built it in my closet and deployed it and started tweeting about it. And some people would come and use it, and there was a chat room, so people would stick around in the chat room. And gradually it built up some momentum, and people started contributing, people started getting jobs, and then it just kind of snowballed from there over the past almost 8 years.
Yeah, it certainly did, in a fantastic way. Is there anything you wish people knew about FreeCodeCamp? Now's the chance to tell us.
Yes, so a lot of people will say, oh, FreeCodeCamp just teaches like Python and JavaScript. I want to learn XYZ. That's totally cool. We have our core curriculum that just focuses on what we think are like the low-hanging fruit as far as getting the skills you need to be able to go get a developer job. And once you get a developer job, that's when the real learning starts, because you're working with a team. You have accountability. You're working with like a real world code base instead of like a simple code base that you yourself are the main maintainer of. So we have tons of projects in the curriculum that you can learn as well. But if there are not projects on the specific tools or language, if you want to learn GraphQL, or if you want to learn, like Cassandra or some other database, or if you want to learn Java or C or Rust or something like that, like we do have courses on these things, not on Rust yet. We're going to have that soon. But they're on the YouTube channel, and they have projects that go with them, and you can they're like a full built out Udemy course essentially. And there are hundreds of them. So just because it's not in the core curriculum doesn't mean we don't have it. It just means that it's extracurricular. The core curriculum is a single linear progression, and it's designed to be like the fastest way from A to B. A being not being a developer, and B being working as a software engineer, basically. The other thing I want to tell everybody is the curriculum has more than 60 projects in it. If you feel like the first few projects are like, oh, this is just hand-holdy, I'm just doing these little coding exercises, it doesn't feel like real coding, or I'm not retaining it or anything. You will retain it once you build things with the projects. Just keep going through the curriculum. You're going to get to a bunch of projects. And we're restructuring the FreeCodeCamp curriculum to have tons of projects throughout. Like everything you'll be doing is building projects. That's been a massive undertaking, basically rewriting the entire curriculum. We're getting close. You're going to see a couple new certifications, like probably in the next few months that go live. We don't have deadlines, as I think we might discuss later. But things are moving fast. So just know that we hear you. Like whenever somebody comments on Reddit or tweets or something like, oh, I wish they had this or this or this, I probably read that. And I probably am actively thinking about how we can address whatever suggestions you all have. We eventually want FreeCodeCamp to essentially cover all aspects of software engineering.
Perfect. Yeah. Going to have a little interlude now because I can see various people are, Tom Chant, for example, sharing tigers in the chat, and Debjit, and Shreyans, and Path. And the reason for this is because we do a little thing here where if you are new, please leave a rabbit in the chat. And if you've been before, please leave a tiger. I usually do it slightly earlier, but I haven't forgotten. Here it is. So yes, bunnies and tigers all vote now. We don't do anything with this. It's a tradition, really, I suppose. So yes, question I saw earlier from Path, which I now can't find. Oh, here it is. Why do you like programming? Quincy Larson.
I just enjoy problem solving. And I think I've always enjoyed like solving puzzles or figuring out like why something works the way it does. Like I love those engineering videos where they're like, how do you make this? You take this aluminum tube and you heat it up and you bend it all these ways. And next thing you know, you've got a bicycle, right? Like I love that kind of how it's made type thing. For me, it's just like everything that is around us is the product of some sort of like evolutionary process that is in somebody's mind. Like they're thinking of easier ways to accomplish things or more economical ways in terms of material, in terms of like emissions, in terms of like, oh, this mineral is very scarce, so maybe we can figure out a way to use this mineral instead. And programming is like taking all that and abstracting it to the software layer where you're limited by imagination and processing power and things like that. But like with your imagination, you can build literally anything. It's unlimited. You're not limited by the number of atoms in the earth that we can easily access and things like that, right? You're not limited by money. Like you can basically get like a commodity computer on like Amazon or some other cloud provider, Azure, and you can use that to build whatever you want. And with open source, it's like you're walking into a giant emporium filled with people who just want you to take their thing. Like, please take this and use it. And it's just the coolest feeling having somebody hand you like this big open source library. And you're like, okay, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to use this? What problems am I going to address? That's why I like programming. It's just the problem solving and the fact that it's fun, but at the end of the day, you're actually getting real things done that can have an impact on people's life, that can make their lives easier or provide a way that they can save money, for example.
Yeah, perfect. There are some more questions in the chat. I will come to them after asking my next question because they kind of link on to each other. So you've mentioned the FreeCodeCamp core curriculum. And I think that might have answered my question here, but I'll double check anyway. Is that what people really need to know to become a web developer? Or is there anything different you want to tell us outside of the core curriculum?
Yeah. Well, I tell people there's no one-stop shop. Just use whatever resources, strike your fancy. I would encourage you to use FreeCodeCamp as a core curriculum because it's cohesively designed and everything like, you're not going to get to a point and be like, oh, we haven't covered this. That was my biggest issue when I had like these giant lists of resources, for example. There'd be like big lists that would go viral on Hacker News or Reddit. Essentially, it was just a list of links to like different resources. Do CS50 on Harvard, do the Stanford database course and the Stanford algorithm course and stuff like that. And like those were good. They were helpful, but there were like often like dependency mismatches, right? Or like, oh, this assumes that I already know calculus, and now I've got to go learn calculus. Oh, calculus assumes that I know this. Like you get lost in all that stuff. But FreeCodeCamp is always going to present a linear progression that the only assumption really is that you're an English speaker. And of course, we've localized FreeCodeCamp into Portuguese, Chinese, Spanish, Italian, Ukrainian is coming soon. So like you are going to be able to basically, you just have to be able to read. You have to have a computer. Now, you can do FreeCodeCamp on a phone, but it's not like the best experience. We're working on our Android app, which I can talk a little bit more about. It's live in the Android App Store if you want to download it. But right now, it's just a shadow of what it will be in a few months' time. We've been making really rapid progress, making it easier to learn on the phone.
Ah, yeah, that is something that people ask us about at Scrimba quite a lot. So I'm sure that will be very popular. Yeah. So on the back of that, Sean Ravenhill asks, do you have any advice for someone struggling to find a dev job after completing a computer science certification at FreeCodeCamp?
Yeah. So getting a job is really a function of three different things. Your skills, which it sounds like if you're progressing through FreeCodeCamp, you're building up skills. Don't take for granted that just because you earn a certification from FreeCodeCamp that you understand a topic. Definitely do interview prep. There are lots of open source tools that you can use. There's like the Developer Interview University, I think, that my friend John Washman created. And that has just it's got flashcards that you can use and just test your knowledge and everything. So there's the skills. There's also the network. Who you know matters. If you have friends that work at a company, it is dramatically easier for you to get an interview at that company than it would be if you were just blindly submitting your application through a web form, right? So build your network, get involved in communities like 100 Days of Code, different forums, the FreeCodeCamp forum. Scrimba has communities and groups and things like that you can get involved in too. Knowing people in your city is really helpful as well. Once the pandemic has truly subsided and you can go and hang out with other developers, go to Tech Talks, go to Hack Nights and participate in weekend hackathons, things like that, and just meet your peers. A lot of times it's not the hiring manager who helps you get the job. It's the person who is your peer, essentially just got a job. Like, hey, do you know any other people who are like you? Because you're awesome. Yeah, I do. I have a friend who used to do hackathons with me. And then boom, you're like in the interview, right? So network. The third thing is your reputation. And if people are Googling you and finding you and you've got a LinkedIn, you've got maybe some articles you've published, if you've got a personal website that it has conferences you've talked at, things like that, those things reassure people. What people are trying to figure out when they are hiring somebody like an HR person, they're just checking boxes. Okay, does this person publish? Does this person, have they built projects? Do they actually have a portfolio? Did they register a domain instead of a web app, that has basic information? Do they have a LinkedIn profile? All those things. So that's kind of your reputation. I would strongly encourage everybody to get active on Twitter, for example. You don't have to actively participate in discussions on Twitter. Twitter can be a dangerous place to have arguments and stuff. I would never argue with people on Twitter. I don't think it's productive, but it is a good place to just be supportive. 100 Days of Code, of course, great Twitter kind of movement that you can be a part of, where you just share positive energy to other people. And the world has plenty of negativity, been plenty of death and destruction over the past few years. We need lots of positive energy right now, and you can signal boost other people's positive energy, and you can introduce your own positive energy there.
Yeah, totally. And if your reason for staying off Twitter is because you hate looking at the sidebar, which is always filled with bad news, which was my reason for not using it for ages, there is a Chrome extension which can block that out with a nice white square instead, which makes everything much more bearable. So there you go. Hot tip from me on Twitter use.
Another tip on that, that's a great tip, Leon. I didn't know that existed, but you can also just set it to a different region. And so I set mine to India because I'm very interested in India. So I'll learn a lot about India, oh, so-and-so happened, just from seeing the Twitter sideline. Obviously, I'm in the United States, but I've learned quite a bit about India, just perceiving India through the eyes of an Indian Twitter user.
Wow, that's a really nice tip. Yeah.
And if you change it to some other language that you can't read, then it's effectively like what Leanne was saying, where you block it
out. Brilliant. I might try that. Yeah, that's good. So there is a question here from Debjit, which touches on something that I wanted to ask you about. Debjit is a self-taught backend dev learning React. It's hard, and I have little time for this. How do you cope with deadlines on learning? Now, you have mentioned previously that you don't do deadlines. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and what that kind of means and what it looks like?
Yeah, well, deadlines, there's a very famous quote that you probably heard before, maybe. Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario, Zelda, Donkey Kong, he said, a rushed game will forever be bad, but a delayed game will eventually be good.
Yeah.
And I think that it's much better to like just do your best and not stress. A lot of times people get whiplash from deadlines. Like they work really hard, they put themselves on a death march, they deliver on the deadline, and they're too exhausted to work, or like other aspects of their well-being have suffered, and it takes a while for them to kind of recover from that deadline grind. And in the process, a lot of times they would have been better off if they were just slowly, peacefully chipping away at the work day in and day out, rather than accelerating to hit the deadline and decelerating and trying to gradually accelerate again, right? So we don't use deadlines internally within FreeCodeCamp for the reasons I mentioned before. One of the ways we're able to do that is through what I call massively parallel organization, where everybody's working on their own thread and nobody's blocking anybody. So it's like non-blocking IO, like this is happening over here, this is happening over here, this is happening over here. All these things are happening, they're getting done, but none of them are dependent on one another because they've intentionally been designed to be things that'll fire off on their own, right? So if you can figure out a way to take the nature of your work and spread it out to where you don't have like some critical path. Now, this is not possible. I don't think you could build an airplane with this approach because at some point, like, hey, we need to like mount the fuselage and put the wheels on. Like, certain things aren't done, other things can't proceed, right? But with running an organization, a lot of things can be like, and the things that can't be, instead of putting a deadline on it, we just say, hey, we're going to prioritize this. Like everything else you're doing, like that's an auxiliary task. Your primary task should be this because this is the most important thing that is potentially blocking other people from proceeding. So, but we don't put a deadline on it because it'll be done when it's done. And usually deadlines are handed down by like non-technical managers who have no idea what actually needs to be done. And they just basically promise their boss like, hey, we'll deliver by this time. And it's like, okay, we need you to do it, in this time frame. That's how death marches happen. That's how you get like the game development industry, which is plagued with, these overly ambitious release dates. It's how you get Cyberpunk 2077, basically, is deadlines. At one deadline at a time. The road to hell is paved with deadlines. and I'll tell you that, like, if you can break free of that and figure out a way to design your work or design your day-to-day life, if you're just trying to learn to code to where you don't depend on deadlines, that's going to make you a lot saner and healthier over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think especially for going back to Debjit's question, I'm not sure exactly what kind of deadline they're referring to. Maybe it is a work-based deadline, but a lot of people I talk to seem to be under the impression that they need to learn to code or learn a certain technology within this kind of arbitrary time frame. And what I've learned speaking to a lot of students is that it's different for everyone. And really, as long as you get there, I don't think it matters too much how long it takes. So, yeah, nice way of looking at it, I think, is to not have deadlines. Yeah, very nice. As a beginner, says Sile, the main struggle I'm having is finding a routine, as it's very hard for me to sit down and just crunch lessons for hours on end. Any advice?
Yeah, my advice would be get plenty of sleep, get plenty of exercise, eat a good diet. Like, obviously the kind of advice that any doctor or even like non-doctor like friend who cares about your well-being would probably give you. That is the priority, right? Like if you're not sleeping 8 hours a night, try to figure out ways that you can sleep 8 hours a night. Try to carve away other things first, because if you're not in an ideal mindset to be able to learn, you should probably just go to sleep. I used to think like, oh, well, I'm totally groggy, but I didn't code it all today. I've got to do at least a little today. Now I just think like, well, just go to sleep and try again tomorrow. But like, really try again tomorrow. Don't get into the habit of like letting yourself off. I think just trying to figure out even like 10 or 15 minutes a day where you just sit down and have total silence and you're just coding and trying to get some forward progress. I think that will accumulate. And life is long. I always remind people, like, I'm 40 years old. If I'm lucky, I'll probably have another 40 or 50 years of life. And I think about like all the things that I've done, even in the past, like 8 years with FreeCodeCamp. Like that's just, if assuming I live to be 80, that's just 10% of my life, right? Like, obviously we can't get back the time in the past when we were kids and didn't even realize what was going on or anything. But like, if you're like in your 20s or 30s or even 40s, like plan to be alive for the next 30, 40 years, or hope to be anyway. You might as well plan, unless you know that you're not going to be alive then. And think about it in those terms, because the difference between becoming a developer in 2022 and becoming a developer in 2023 is maybe like 2 or 3% of your career, right? And it may make all the difference in terms of like you're not making dramatic decisions like quitting your job to try to learn to code. Like, don't quit your job. Don't quit your job to learn to code. I'll say it again. Like, unless you just have like tons of money that you've saved up and you have the luxury of being able to do that, I would encourage you to figure out a way that you can continue to make some income just so you don't have to stress. Take it easy, really. Like, unless you are in a dire situation where you don't have enough food, or you have some sort of medical condition that you can't pay for, something that is literally like a ticking time bomb, then try to de-stress and just take it slowly. The biggest thing I see is people imagining some sort of like stressor that it's not really there. Like, oh, my family is going to be so disappointed if I don't become a developer within the next 6 months, or like all the jobs are going to go away or whatever. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. So just take your time, and you're going to enjoy coding a lot more. What I don't want is for you to see this as a grueling process. I don't want this to seem like you're beating yourself up every day just trying to get to a finish line, because it should be fun. Coding should be fun. And, initially you're not going to be passionate about it, because who's passionate about like some computer telling you every 3 seconds, like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Compiler error, syntax error, test failing, like, dependencies that you haven't even touched, having issues, having to go and reinstall things, like trying to get your development environment set up properly. All these things, these are stressful at first. It's not fun. Like, anybody who says they love programming right when they first started, I think, well, they probably started when they were a little kid and they've just forgotten the initial frustrations with it. It takes time. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, totally. Wow. Pedro is asking, I see many instruments in the background. Yeah. Was music your occupation before you became a developer? And if so, do you still have time to do music?
So I just started playing music during the pandemic because I had like lots of extra time, and I was like, what am I going to do during this period of time? Like for us, the pandemic's still going on here in the US, unfortunately. We're still waiting to get approval for our kids to get vaccinated. So they're not in school. They're just hanging out here at the house. We're just being really cautious because we don't know what the long-term effects of COVID-19 are going to be on kids. And we'd rather not know. We'd rather just get them vaccinated, and it's okay for them to like hang out at the house and be homeschooled for a few extra months. But I wasn't doing a lot. Like, we weren't going out. We weren't doing anything. So I had a little bit of extra time. And the first few months, I was just playing lots of video games. I'm like, oh, I've got time to play video games. And then I was just like, wait a second, like maybe this time is a gift. Like, I'm somebody who's in a very fortunate position. Like, I'm not worrying about like food security. I'm not worrying about paying rent and things like that. Like, I could do something that like a longer term endeavor. So I just started playing music and just gradually started learning different instruments. And so, yeah, I spend probably like 4 hours a day playing music. Whenever I'm not watching my kids or working on FreeCodeCamp, I'm playing music. And I'm working on a jazz album that I'm going to hopefully release before the end of the year.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, fabulous. Let us know in the chat what hobbies you started in lockdown. Yeah, what did I do? Some gardening, and my husband and I, we did try acrobatics one evening. That didn't stick around. Yeah. Path asks, what are your thoughts about AI? Are the bots going to take over, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I get this question all the time. And what I think is software development is the process of automating things. So by definition, software development will be the last thing that gets completely automated. You don't need to worry about your job security as a developer. What I would worry about is your job security if you're not a developer. And if you also think that AI is going to be able to eat the world, as they say. I don't think that it will anytime soon. I mean, we're seeing that with self-driving. There was all this hype. Oh, every car is going to be self-driving by like the 2020s and everything. And if you talk to like an expert at like Tesla or an expert at like Uber or some of these other companies that have big self-driving, Waymo at Google, they'll probably say, oh yeah, we're making good progress, but it's probably still like 8 or 10 years away. And I was stunned, like, really? Like, it seems so close, but it turns out like it's a lot harder than we thought it was. And I think it's the same thing with, it's impressive when you see like GPT-3 and things like that. It's impressive, but then you realize it's impressive within very specific domains. And the work in order to be able to get the machine to do what you want it to do is work itself. What does a developer do? They tell machines what to do, right? We manage machines. If the machines could just manage themselves, humans wouldn't need to work in general. We just live this life of luxury. Now, I'm a little bit less, I'm a little sanguine about that. I don't think that humans would just magically like figure out a way to like peacefully redistribute wealth and like everybody would just be able to have this utopian existence. I think that we'll still have some sort of, grind. It'll be like the Jetsons. Like you'll still have to go to the office and press the button that starts all the robots, right? And you'll still have traffic in flying cars. You'll still have like flying car traffic and stuff. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Like I'm excited about artificial intelligence. There's a lot of risk associated with it. We just published a video. Check it out. Kylie Ying just published a video. Don't watch it right now because I want you to listen to what I'm saying. But Kylie Ying from FreeCodeCamp, she just published like a talk on like artificial intelligence and ethics. On the FreeCodeCamp Talks channel. So Google FreeCodeCamp Talks, subscribe to that channel. We've got lots of conference talks on there. But I think AI is just going to be like, or machine learning. The reason they call it machine learning is because artificial intelligence had such hyped up promises that it didn't deliver that like you couldn't raise money as an AI company anymore. So everybody's like, oh, let's rebrand as machine learning. Who knows? Maybe they'll rebrand it again because machine learning, as exciting as it is, there's still a lot of hype that has not been delivered upon. And, people just assume magic's going to happen without realizing how long it takes to get these things going.
Yeah. I like the idea of rebranding ourselves to machine managers. Right. That amuses me. So yes, Path, no need to worry about the Terminators taking over yet. So that, good news. Can I add my free code certificate onto my CV? Asks Sunny.
Most definitely. And a lot of people ask, do certifications help? It's not the same as getting like an Azure certification or an AWS certification, which, by the way, we have courses that will prepare you to take those exams if you want to, like full-length, 15-hour courses, everything you need to know to pass the Azure exam, for example, like the many different Azure exams, the many different AWS exams, even Google Cloud. We recently published that. But it does, at the very least, it shows that you care about learning, that you're actively learning. A lot of people in industry will recognize like, oh, FreeCodeCamp, yeah, like we have a good reputation, and people are not going to think like this is like you got the certification where Cracker Jack box, right? Like they're going to know, oh, well, these are 300-hour certifications. This is indicative of time spent learning. The real value of a certification is the time you spent learning to earn it. The certification itself is not going to carry you. And I think a lot of people just go and like bang out the certifications as quickly as they can and get the test passing without really appreciating that like the actual learning process is important. Yes, you can quickly get the test to pass. We do have an academic honesty policy that you have to sign in order to claim the certifications. And we do audit projects for plagiarism and other forms of cheating. So don't cheat. We will eventually identify you as a cheater. It might take a few months, but we'll like null your certification and like basically like set you as a cheater in our system. But as long as you're honest and you're not cheating and you're not plagiarizing, yeah, go for it. Earn those certifications, put them on your CV. We even have like a button on the certification that you can add it to your LinkedIn. And if you add it to your LinkedIn, I think it puts you into our alumni network. We have more than 500,000 people around the world who are learning the code and who have, listed FreeCodeCamp on their LinkedIn.
That is handy. Yeah. Clayton asks, how do you balance your time between work, family, social life, etc.?
Yeah, well, I can give you a pretty granular breakdown. So I sleep 8 hours a night. I spend about 4 hours a day with my kids, like breakfast, nap time, getting ready for bed, reading books and stuff. So like kids, and then I work about 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I do it a little differently. Instead of taking weekends, I just work less every day. And then that is like a lot of people might be like, oh, Quincy, you're like a workaholic. But no, if you multiply 6 times 7, you get about 42 hours a week. I don't work crazy hours. I used to. Like when FreeCodeCamp was first getting up, I was working like 120 hours. Like all I would do is sleep and then crawl over to my computer and start coding or start streaming or start doing something that would build up momentum within the community. And I think that's normal. Like if you're trying to start a nonprofit or if you're trying to start a startup or something like that, like you should be working like crazy to get that up. But once you get some momentum on it, I think you should pull back and focus on sustainability long term. So, like work-life balance is very important for me. Everybody at FreeCodeCamp, like I explicitly say, hey, don't work more than 40 hours a week. If you work more than 40 hours one week, work slightly less than 40 hours the next week. Just try to balance it out around 40 hours a week. And I do the same myself. And then like basically the remainder of the time, try to go to the gym 3 days a week. I try to I take my kids to the park every day and just go walking for about an hour to get some exercise. And then, I spend like all the rest of the time I spend playing music. I don't have time for video games anymore. I don't really have time for anything other than family, sleep, work, and music. But that's how I want it.
Yeah, right. Lovely answer. Thank you for that. Linda says, I will be finishing my responsive web design next week. Then I'll move on to my next course. How many courses do you feel I need to complete before I can start applying for work as a junior dev?
So the FreeCodeCamp curriculum is structured in a way that like you can hop off at any time and start applying for jobs or just keep studying while you apply for jobs. The further you get in the curriculum, the more likely you'll be able to get a good job and the broader the skill set. Like I consider a front-end developer to be like probably the best entry-level type developer role, because with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, maybe some knowledge of like Salesforce or WordPress, whatever like the jobs are requiring, I would look at those jobs. There are tons of job postings. Just comb through and figure out what you want to do. If you're already building your reputation, if you're already building your network and things like that, then just start applying when you feel ready. It's the one thing I always tell people is like, it's not like if you bomb an interview, like that person's going to phone every other coach or every other hiring manager in town and be like, hey, this person, don't hire this person. They didn't know how to reverse a linked list or something like that, right? Like, don't worry about that. What you should worry about is just time. Like you're spending a whole lot of time applying for jobs that you could be spending learning, and that can be a grind. Also, you can get discouraged. A lot of people I talk to who get really good jobs, it was like their 120th job application or the 240th job application where they finally got through the interview process and got a satisfactory offer. And sometimes this is something we published time and time again on the FreeCodeCamp forum in the careers section. People will talk about how like all of a sudden they started getting offers and they got like 3 or 4 offers at the same time, basically within like a week period after months and months of like, getting rejections and stuff. So you can hit kind of a tipping point. But my humble advice would just be do it sustainably. Start sooner than you think. So if you think that you're ready to like get a job at like a local company, like doing front-end development or doing WordPress development or whatever it is they need, just figure out what they need. Try to interview, be candid about your skills, but don't sell yourself short. Just be like, yeah, I've been very actively learning to code, and I built this project and this project and this project, and I think I could help you maintain your existing web apps and potentially build out some additional features, something like that. And I think you'll be surprised at how much of getting a job is just being somebody that they like, and also having a bare minimum like threshold of skills that they need for you to be able to start working. Now, the first few months on the job, I don't think anybody has the illusion you're going to drop in, you're going to revolutionize their web app. Like the first few months on the job, you're going to be kind of a net negative in the sense that they're going to be putting more resources into you than they're going to be getting out in terms of like, code that works really well, or increased revenue as a result of the code you've written or something like that. But just accept that and do your best and don't stress. It's a very stressful process trying to get a job, particularly stressful as a software engineer because so much money's on the line and companies are very risk averse. Just try to get whatever foothold you can. If you get a freelance client, anything like that, that's a foothold, and just try to build from there. Your first developer job will be the hardest job to get. After you get that, it can be relatively easy. The more experience you accrue, pretty soon people won't even be interviewing you. They'll just be like, "Hey, can you come work for us?" I'm not exaggerating. Like that is kind of the future you have to look forward to if you stick with this and if you put in the time and energy to build your reputation, your network, and your skills.
Yeah. On the topic of reputation, Michael LaRocca, he is a person who writes a lot of blog posts for Scrimba and other places, and he's watched and shared your fantastic Copeland Conference 2017 talk on writing technical blog posts. Do you have any additional advice or tips on the subject? Yeah, he's also in Hashnode's Bootcamp.
Yeah, Hashnode is a great place to write. I think Scrimba might have a blog as well. Lots of companies have blogs. See if you can write something and get on their blog. Like that will increase your readership, and also that'll be a proof of concept in you as an author. When people apply to become an author on FreeCodeCamp's publication, we're pretty selective, and it's hard to get I guess permission to be able to submit posts. So what I encourage you to do is just go out and write like as much as you can on the open web. If you can create your own blog, that's a great way to start, and just try to build up momentum there. Publish, like don't be a perfectionist, try to get things out there. This is where having your own social media presence helps, because you can tweet and maybe some of your friends or family will go in and be like, oh, that was helpful, like great job. And that is important because you're a human being, you're not a robot. You do need positive feedback in order for you to feel galvanized to keep going. If you get discouraged, you're not going to be writing a lot. So just keep those human factors in mind as well.
Yeah, hey, perfect. Excellent advice there on perfectionism. Perfect is the enemy of done, is what I always say. And that is a seasoned perfectionist talking. Yeah. Oh, interesting question from Perry. What strategies or tools do you have for organizing current and future tech projects?
Yeah, Trello is an underrated tool. I use it for pretty much everything. You can get really fancy. You can use like Notion. You can use whatever tools you want. My to-do list, I just use a text editor and like delete lines when they're done and things like that.
Yeah.
Starting with the boilerplate, if you're building a code base, just getting like a good boilerplate like Next.js or something like that, and using that can do a lot of the decisions for you. Ruby on Rails was very popular for a long time. It might still be somewhat popular. And one of the reasons was because they made a lot of the decisions for you. So you could focus on what makes your app special rather than the routine stuff that most apps include, authentication, email notifications, things like that, right? So you're writing code that is relevant to the specific problem you're trying to address, and not just reinventing the wheel over and over to, like I don't know very many car manufacturers that manufacture their own tires, right? So.
Yeah. There was a question actually on Twitter, I think yesterday, that was said, is it cheating to use frameworks or templates? It's like, well, of course not. It's efficiency. So yeah, great. Joseph asks, says, first of all, I appreciate the tips delivered perfectly. My question is it viable to learn intermediate JS, CSS, and React at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, you can learn as much as you want at the same time. Like with music, for example, I learned bass, and then I learned piano and guitar and drums. And a lot of that, there was overlap between those. Like there's going to be a lot of overlap between like state management with JavaScript and with React, for example. And it doesn't hurt to try, like, just know that you're learning a lot of things at the same time, and don't get frustrated if it's hard, because you're kind of doing it on hard mode. If you want to do it on easy mode, just follow the FreeCodeCamp curriculum and work through each certification in order. We do have, responsive web design is the first certification. Then we do JavaScript. Then we do front-end libraries, which is like React and Redux and stuff like that. We recommend learning them in that sequence, but there are no rules. Like FreeCodeCamp, we intentionally make it so you can just skip around and you can start wherever you want. As long as you build the projects, you can earn the certifications. You don't even have to actually do the lessons. The projects are what matters. The rest is just there to prepare you for the projects. So just the most important thing is you're having fun, because learning is all about having fun. I'm going to grab a glass of water real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for all your lovely questions here. Alex says, jazz album after like a year. Wow, that is impressive. Yeah, totally. I am looking forward to hearing that. I'm sure Michael is too. Michael enjoys jazz. And he's reporting that he was into baking during the first lockdown and piano during the second. What you forgot to mention there, Michael, is our other hobby of hairdressing during both lockdowns. So yes, we gave that a go. Yeah, wonderful. Question for you now, Quincy. I want to talk a little bit about 100 days of code. How did it come about? And in your opinion, how does it help people to learn to code?
Yeah, so 100 Days of Code has a really interesting history. And if you Google like history of 100 Days of Code, I wrote about it. Basically, this gentleman from Russia who was living in Toronto named Alexander Callaway wanted to learn to code, and he needed a commitment device. He's like, oh, I know that I'm the kind of person who will just sleep in if I don't have some sort of very clear framework within which to get things done. So he created the 100 Days of Code challenge. And basically, the challenge is you code at least a little bit every day, and you tweet about your progress. And you also support other people who are tweeting about the progress. You're supposed to tweet, and then you're also supposed to go out and like congratulate two people or like their posts or something who are also doing the challenge. So if you think about it, like that's good, because on average you're going to get at least two people giving you positive feedback on your daily announcement. But it's a powerful commitment device, because if you can code for 100 days in a row, that's probably like a sustainable habit you can build up and carry with you indefinitely. Yeah.
No, it's really nice to see people encouraging each other with 100 Days of Code. And what I like about it as well is how you can find out things that you didn't previously know, or even find out about technologies you hadn't heard of before. So it's a very interesting thing to keep up with, I've found. Some people, though, struggle with what to do for 100 Days of Code. Have you got any tips on choosing the day's code? Or does it not really matter?
I mean, the idea is just you're coding, and as long as you're coding, you're winning, because that's the name of the game. It's just coding. Like anything, practice makes perfect. I think people underestimate the amount of practice that's necessary to become a good developer. I mean, it's like a lifelong pursuit. Doing the FreeCodeCamp curriculum, I think, is the most common thing that people do. A lot of people will take courses on Scrimba. They'll take courses like a lot of independent course creators have courses you can do. And doing those is good. But if you're looking for something that's simple and structured, I mean, FreeCodeCamp, like obviously I'm biased because that's the project that I'm associated with. Yeah, it was kind of born out of the FreeCodeCamp community. The FreeCodeCamp, the 100 Days of Code bot was created by Aman Mittal, and it's open source. By the way, it's probably one of the most popular Twitter bots on Twitter. I think it's got like more than 100,000 followers. But it just basically retweets what other people are tweeting about, like related to 100 Days of Code. And that's open source. If you ever want to build a Twitter bot, grab that. But like we don't own 100 Days of Code. Like I think that somebody had tweeted that before. Alexander Calloway tweeted it. So we're not trying to claim invention of it. But I can tell you that, like, in many ways, 100 Days of Code, like, it exemplifies the kind of virtues that our community holds dear, which are, supporting one another and being persistent and making a little bit of progress every day.
Wow. Yeah. Perfect. Debjit has an interesting question. I learn new tech when I get into trouble or my project needs it. I think that's the case for a lot of us. It fills a lot of learning gaps in my knowledge. Is it normal to learn just what is needed and learn the rest of tech later on as the need arises? Actually, this is interesting because on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, my colleague Alex spoke to Ali Spittle about how to remember everything you learn. And one of her tips was basically to learn things that you either like or need. So what's your take on this, Quincy?
I mean, I would agree with Ali there. Like, if you have some sort of emotional connection to it, you're going to retain it a lot better. And it's going to, if it's fun, you're going to do more of it, and doing more of it reinforces it. So, follow your passion. And if your passion isn't for coding, it will be with, familiarity. Gradually you'll build up an affinity for different technologies as you use them. Yeah,
I agree. Bob is mentioning that in his upcoming React course, he spends a fair amount of time with plain CSS and JS challenges. So going back to Joseph's question earlier about can you learn things in tandem, essentially that's what Bob's doing in his upcoming React course. He thinks it's good to overlap things a bit. So I hope that helps. Joseph, yeah, wonderful. I wanted to talk a little bit about learning to learn, a buzzword we've heard a lot of lately, one that Michael says occasionally. Never really been clear on what it actually means. What does it mean to you, Quincy?
Yeah, strategies and techniques for retaining things, for organizing concepts in your mind. There's probably the most popular online course of all time. Barbara Oakley, she's a professor. She created this course called Learn How to Learn. I'd encourage you to take it. It covers like mnemonics. It covers like all different facets of how humans actually learn. As a developer, your primary job is to learn. You're going to be learning for the rest of your career. The interesting thing about being a developer is because code is infinitely reproducible, if you had already solved a problem, you would just reuse the solution from that old problem. So by definition, you're constantly going to be tackling new problems that you've never explored before or nobody's explored before. So you're going to be learning constantly, learning how a subsection of a legacy code base works so you can, maintain it or build new features on top of it. Learning how a new library works so that you can incorporate it into whatever solution you're building. You're going to be a learning machine. And that's good news because humans are learning machines. Like evolutionarily, learning is the key adaptation that has allowed humans to flourish for better or for worse. Embrace your inner human and become like a true learning machine. And it's definitely worth like investing, 10, 15 hours, however long it takes to get through that course, like hearing from an expert strategies for learning. And it's probably going to bring incredible dividends over the coming decades of your life.
Perfect. That is a fantastic tip. Yeah. In your view, what can people do to make learning to code easier? And I suppose by this, do you have any quick fixes which can make the task seem kind of less onerous and intimidating?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have two pieces of advice. One, try to code at least a little bit every day.
Mm.
Again, that momentum will help you. It's a lot harder to restart the process of learning if you've taken a week or two off. You forget things. The speed of forgetting is incredible, as you've probably seen lots of webcomics and things like that, jokes about people like looking at their code from 6 months ago. Might as well be somebody else's code, because you forget so quickly. But by learning a little every day and coding a little every day, you build up some momentum and you kind of strengthen those learning muscles. My other piece of advice would be to just hang out with other people, like get involved in the community. If you're tuning into this live stream, you're already in, among friends, people who have similar goals, who want to learn to code, who want to increase their skills, who want to be able to do meaningful work, who want to be able to provide for their families. Get involved in your local community. There are professional groups. There are university clubs that you can potentially be a part of, even if you're not a university student. A lot of them will accept you. Meetups, hackathons, any kind of in-person thing that you can safely do during a pandemic. I would encourage you to get out there and make friends and find your tribe. And when you follow people on Twitter who are positive and energetic and have like a love for learning, you can take a look at who I'm following on Twitter if you want some general like tips for who to follow. But like I said, like positive energy is very important. And I think that positive peer pressure that you can get from a tribe will help propel you forward.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. Artur is thrilled to have been able to catch you live. Yes, lovely to have you here, Artur. And I have a question here, which is slightly in our own interest here at Scrimba, and that is, which tutorials are currently missing from the online learning space, in your view?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of room for new courses on PHP, Java, C++, courses that a lot of the best books and forum posts and Stack Overflow answers and things like that were written like 20 years ago.
Yeah. That
sort of stuff can be refreshed. I have people constantly like, oh, like all of my Java books are out of date, or like, they're boring. Like, where can I find something that is as dynamic and exciting as what you see in the Python community or the JavaScript community for Java, right? And I think there's a huge opportunity to create learning resources around that. So FreeCodeCamp, we're trying to do that. We're just writing lots of Java tutorials, lots of C++ tutorials. We published a course last year on COBOL, which is a technology that is like 40 plus years old, 50 years old, I don't know. And that was surprisingly well received. Like, a lot of people are interested in mainframe development in 2021. So I think a lot of these technologies that are older, that are more mature, but are still widely used, those are good. Of course, like when you have new technology, people often rush. Like, there are probably 1,001 GraphQL tutorials or Kubernetes tutorials and things like that. And it's fine if you think you can write a better tutorial on those topics or take a different angle than the things out there. But give PHP some love, give WordPress, Salesforce, a lot of these ecosystems, there are a lot of people that are trying to learn these that are just Googling into oblivion and finding, 10-year-old Stack Overflow threads with no answer, right? Yeah. Things like that. So that would be my humble advice. If you really want to help people and you want to maximize the impact, like some of my most popular articles I've written about have been about the most pedestrian, mundane, unsexy concepts that people just happen to Google a lot, like ASCII codes and things like that, right?
Yeah, totally. Hey, that is really good point there. PHP doesn't get a lot of love, but it ain't going away. So maybe we should be making courses about it. Yeah. Wow. I can't believe that our hour is already up, Quincy. That is really quite amazing. I have really enjoyed speaking to you. It's been wonderful. And to
likewise, Leanne.
finish off, I would really like to give people a little tip on what they can do for 100 days of code. And that is the latest weekly web dev challenge on Scrimba. Some people actually do this for 100 days of code, I've seen, which is lovely. The current one is this Pomodoro timer. Yes, that you have to wire up. It's a lot of fun. And I've got lots of nice submissions. I like this big tomato one. Yes, so add yours to the list. You have until next Monday at 1 o'clock British summertime to send it in. Yeah, so fabulous. Quincy, thank you so much for coming along and for giving such wonderful answers to all of our questions. It was really fantastic to talk to you.
Thank you for the thoughtful questions, and everybody who's listening, I hope you have fun. Remember to have fun. Remember to get plenty of sleep, and just focus on the long run. Yeah,
absolutely. And if you enjoyed this, please consider hitting one of the buttons below, preferably not dislike, subscribe and or like, and then you'll be the first to hear about more Ask an Expert live streams. And with that, I will say goodbye to you and hopefully see you on Friday for mine and Michael's live coding session. Yes, until then, have a lovely coding half a week.